Hey guys, welcome to the Business Growth Made Simple podcast. I am Steve, your host, and right now I'm just going to say things that I've heard a lot lately. It's been kind of kept quiet, but I'm going to say it out loud. Most service businesses aren't struggling because they're bad at the work. They're struggling because they're flying blind. They know how to install a water heater blindfolded, maybe tune up an air conditioner upside down in a crawl space, or repaint a house while listening to a podcast at 2x speed. But ask them their numbers, they get a blank look on their face. And suddenly, it's like trying to teach your dog algebra, the head tilts, confusion, and heavy blinking. Service businesses don't usually fail because of effort. They fail because the owner is running the business on vibes, not data. He's using the force to run the business, not the numbers. Look, I get it. Numbers really aren't sexy. Nobody starts their business and says, I can't wait to calculate my margins today. Or they don't start it because they love spreadsheets. I'm going to tell you a couple things that I found out in my research recently. U.S. Bank found that 82% of small businesses fail because of poor cash flow management. Gallup says most owners spend less than 10% of their week looking at their metrics. And a Harvard Business Review study found that companies who track their KPIs weekly outperform competitors by 2 to 3 times in growth and profitability. Let me say that one again. A Harvard Business Review study found that companies who track their KPIs weekly outperform competitors by up to 3 times in growth and profitability. Yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's nothing minor. That's nothing small. That's I'm going to retire early while my competition is still stuck upside down in the crawl space, tuning up those air handlers. So today we're going to talk about 5 KPIs, key performance indicators, the top 5, the ones every service business absolutely must track if you want to grow, hire, scale, and honestly sleep at night. And the five of them are: number 1 is revenue. Number 2 is your profit margin. Number 3 is your cost of acquiring a customer. Number 4 is your close rate, and number 5 is your cash reserves. These 5 numbers are your business's version of a dashboard. Your revenue is like your speedometer. Your profit margin is your oil pressure. Your CAC, or customer acquisition cost, is miles per gallon. Your close rate could be your engine efficiency, and cash reserves is your fuel tank. Ignore any one of those, and the business breaks down on the side of the road. And AAA does not cover I refuse to track my metrics. So let's grab that cup of coffee, take a breath, and let's dive into the numbers that could really make the difference between scaling your business and possibly shutting the doors. Let's start with the number everybody thinks they understand: revenue. Revenue is real simple. How much money came in, right? Real simple. Well, yes and no. See, revenue is like the weight on a scale. Just because the number went up doesn't mean it's muscle. It might be just water weight in Taco Bell. But here's why it matters. Revenue shows demand, and if revenue is flat or dropping, the market is telling you something. People are either not finding you, not choosing you, and they're choosing somebody else. We don't like to hear that, but it's true. Revenue reveals whether your pricing matches your value. If you're booked solid and still broke, congrats. You're running a charity, not a business. And your customers love your charity work. According to Service Titan in 2024 contractor report, 34% of contractors say underpricing is their number one profit killer. Not the labor, not the materials, underpricing. Revenue tells you if your market is working. Let me rephrase that. Revenue is telling you if your marketing is working. If your revenue doesn't grow after you've invested in marketing, the problem is one or more of these issues. Could be the wrong message. Ever think about, that would be like putting out heater tune-ups in June. Wrong message, wrong time. How about to the wrong audience? One of the things that we tend to do is we spray and pray. It's kind of like the shotgun approach, right? We're just going to put it out there. And my favorite line that I love to hate is, we service anyone. Really? Do you really want to service anyone and everyone? Or do you want to look for your ideal customer? Maybe it's the wrong offer. How about the wrong follow-up? I got into a discussion the other day with somebody in a Facebook group, and we were talking about follow-up. And the question was, we're losing people. They're going cold. Well, is it that you're not following up at all? You're not getting a hold of people? Or is it the wrong follow-up? And that's what they had to go back and determine. And again, like I said earlier, the wrong season. That's like advertising air conditioning in February or heating in June. I mean, you could do it, but that's on you, right? And what happens when you don't track revenue? Owners who don't track revenue always think they're doing better than what they really are. It's the same delusion I used when I haven't estimated my calories when standing in front of Chick-fil-A. But when you actually track those calories, yeah, maybe that's why I can't lose the extra couple pounds. When you don't track revenue, you fall for busy equals profitable, which is one of the most dangerous lies a small business person can tell themselves. Busy doesn't pay the mortgage. Busy doesn't cover payroll. And busy does not build wealth. Revenue tells you if the business is growing. What revenue tells you when it's off? Well, if revenue is down, maybe your marketing isn't working. Maybe your sales process is weak. Maybe you're pricing too low. Customer experience is broken. Your referrals have dried up. Or you're targeting the wrong people. And if your revenue is flat, you've probably hit a capacity wall or you're underpriced. Maybe you haven't added new services. Or you're not promoting maintenance agreements. You're not raising prices with inflation. But if revenue is up, great. That's a good thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean the company is healthy. Revenue growing while profit margin is shrinking is like gaining weight while losing muscle. Looks big on the outside, but you're weak on the inside. So let's talk about the second one, the profit margin. Revenue feeds the ego. I think I've said this before. Profit is going to what's paying the bills and feeding your family. Profit margin is the percentage of revenue you actually keep after paying everybody. According to SCORE and the SBA research, the average small business nets 7 to 10% profit margin. Here's the thing though, that's the average small business, 7 to 10%. However, the average service company, the contractor, might net 3 to 4%. While the top performing trades are hitting 15 to 20%. That means the average contractor who does $1 million in revenue only keeps $40,000 to $60,000. You can make more money as an assistant manager at Chick-fil-A and get the free waffle fries. Oh, and not work on Sunday. So why does the profit margin matter? If your pricing makes sense, it's going to show. It's going to show if your labor is efficient, if your overhead is too much or just right, if your team is being productive, if the job and the job scope is done correctly, if your business is financially healthy. A low profit margin is a symptom, not a cause. Something up the line is broken. Now, when you don't track it, it's like not checking the oil in your engine. Sure, truck runs for a while. One day you hear a noise, a pop, a puff of smoke, and suddenly you're Googling cheapest used truck within 500 miles. Or how much does it cost to replace the engine? When you don't watch your margins, you can be busy and broke. You're going to hire based on feelings instead of facts. Run out of cash during the slow seasons. Fall behind on taxes. You can't afford new equipment. You can't even pay yourself a decent salary. And yeah, I said it. Some of y'all own the business and still pay yourselves last. Even the IRS thinks that's dumb. You know, I just had a conversation again online with somebody who we were talking about. What do you do when you love your employees during this slow time? How do you keep them from not going somewhere else or having them on unemployment or laying them off or whatever? And the way the conversation turned, it turned to, well, realistically, if you have a slow season every year at the same time, you should be saving for that slow season so you can keep them and still work on bringing work in. So that way you're not eating into all of your savings, but be able to cover them if you love your employees and you want to keep them. Now, when your profit margin is off, let's say they're low, your pricing could be too low. Your labor efficiency is bad. You know, maybe it takes an hour and a half to change a blower motor and your guys are taking 4 hours. Maybe there's too many callbacks. Ooh, that's a bad one. That'll rip into your profit margin pretty quickly. Yeah, I fixed it. I know I fixed it. It was running when I left. Well, if you fixed it, why did they call last night and say it's not working? Maybe there's something else. Maybe you just overlooked something. Wasted materials. How about the wrong tech and the wrong job on the wrong roles? Wrong seat on the bus, so to speak. Too many discounts. Hey, have you ever had that where your techs are giving out discounts just to get the sale? Too much overtime. Again, that goes back to the labor efficiency, right? How about a bloated overhead? More people in the office than actually out making the money. I worked at a company where we had, it was almost a 1-to-1 office to producer. It was crazy. I don't know how they were making money other than the fact that they kept screaming about billable hours. It's like, well, if we kind of reduce the overhead a little bit, we should be okay. And if your margins suddenly drop, let's say everything's looking good, and then all of a sudden you see a huge drop in it, well, could be discounting too much. Maybe you added staff too soon. Things were really, really busy. It was looking like it was going to stay busy, so you decided to pull the trigger, hire somebody else in the office to keep everybody going, and then the profit margins dropped quickly. And maybe it's just for a time being, right? This was a growth strategic plan to bring them in so that they could be more efficient and get the guys out in a more efficient manner. That's very possible. And if it was strategic, your profits are going to drop, but you're paying attention. Maybe the marketing is bringing in low quality leads, not your ideal clients. Or, like during the slow times, maybe you took on an unprofitable job or a quote break even job that wound up going longer than what you anticipated. So that break even actually went below the break even. It's possible. And if your margins rise, beautiful. Tells you you're priced correctly. You guys are efficient. Your team is doing well. They're improving. Your systems are working. And your marketing is targeting the right people. Profit margin is the scoreboard. No guesswork, just the honest truth. The numbers don't lie unless somebody put the wrong numbers in. Now, your CAC, or your customer acquisition cost, that's the number that makes or breaks your marketing. It's how much you spend to get one new customer. So take your total marketing divided by the number of new customers. If you spent $5,000 on ads and got 50 new customers, not recurring, your cost or your customer acquisition cost would be $100. It matters because expensive customers will kill your profitability faster than cheap pricing. According to HubSpot and the Small Business Trends, businesses that don't track their CAC overspend on marketing by up to 50%. Businesses that do track their CAC grow 60% faster. And most small businesses, they underestimate their cost of acquisition by 2 to 3 times. In other words, most businesses think they're spending $100 to get a customer, but reality says it's more like $300. And that's why the math never adds up. Now, when you're not tracking your customer acquisition costs, you start believing the lies that, hey, my marketing doesn't work. Facebook ads suck. Kind of agree with that one. Google is too expensive. And word of mouth is all we need. No, the truth is your marketing is blind and bloated. You don't track CAC, you'll spend money on the wrong platforms. Maybe Facebook works for one company in one area of the country because their ideal client is on there, but maybe it doesn't work for another company in another area of the country because their ideal client is not on Facebook. Maybe it's the wrong message. Again, to the wrong audience. Maybe your offer's off. People don't see the value in your offer. And like we had said before, maybe it's the wrong season. And the crazy part is, so many service businesses have no idea which source produces their highest, most ideal customers. None. They don't realize that Nextdoor leads close at 3 times the rate of Facebook. Or direct mail still generates bigger ticket clients. How about email produces repeat customers for pennies on the dollar? Just a simple monthly newsletter. Here's what's going on. Here's what's going on in your community. Keep your name in front of people for virtually nothing. Referral programs, they cost almost nothing. So your customer acquisition cost is your compass for the marketing. Now again, when it's off, when it's too high, let's say, you're targeting the wrong audience or offer's not compelling. your ads are horrible, your follow-up could be weak, or maybe they just don't trust your brand yet, especially if it's early on in your marketing. The trust factor just isn't there. And if it's low, your referral engine is working. Your offers are dialed in, you're attracting the high intent, the right customers, and your marketing starts to have momentum. Your cost of acquisition should go down as your brand grows, not up. Which means that the more you invest in the right places, the more of the right customers you're going to get. And there's always the close rate. Close rate is the percentage of leads that turn into paying customers. If 10 customers call, you book 4, your close rate on the call is 40%. Now, if your close rate is basically setting money on fire if it's low, and if it's really low, I'm talking dumpster fire, tire fire, 4th of July, in the driveway, let's burn money fire. Harvard studies showed that businesses that improve their close rates by just 10% grow revenue by up to 50% without adding marketing costs. Let me read that again. Businesses that improve their close rates by just 10%. So if you're only closing 40% and you go to 50%, your revenue is going to grow by up to 50%. Without adding marketing costs. No new ads, no more leads, just better conversion. Service Titan data shows that the average contractor close rate for small jobs is 30 to 50%. For big jobs would be 20 to 35%. And for maintenance calls, 60 to 80%. If yours is lower than that, don't panic. But don't pretend it's fine. When you're not tracking your close rate, you're likely to blame your marketing or maybe overspend on ads thinking I need more calls coming in. Well, if you're not closing the calls you have coming in, that's a waste of money. You burn out your team because they're cranking out, and they're trying, but their close rate's so low. You're chasing the low quality customers. You're not your ideal client. You create feast or famine cycles. Imagine a restaurant that keeps buying more ingredients because the chef can't cook. That's what a business does when it has a bad close rate. Now, what it could tell you when it's off, it could very well be your pricing isn't aligned with your value. The higher the value, the higher the price you can command. Could mean your techs just need some sales training. I really don't like to call it sales training, especially with techs, because none of them want to be called a salesman. For me, it's service. It's all about serving your client. So maybe they're not serving the clients as best they could. Maybe your scripts aren't working or they're not saying them right. Maybe your quotes are confusing. You're not making it easy for the customer to do business with you. Maybe you're attracting the wrong clients. Your response time's low. Goes into a whole different area, right? Your response time is low. And if your close rate drops suddenly, there's a couple things that could be causing that. Maybe competitors are undercutting you. Maybe your reviews have dipped a little bit. Maybe the quality of leads have dropped. Reevaluate your marketing. Maybe your follow-up is just completely inconsistent. You do well for a month, you get really extremely busy, and then the follow-up slows off. And then you watch this nosedive again. I fell into that trap when I had my company. We get really, really busy. I'd start slacking on things, not keeping up with things. I would watch our calls coming in get less and less on the schedule, so we'd have to bang back into figuring out what it was and doing follow-up and stuff. And if it's rising, that's a good thing, right? You're creating trust. Training well, scripts are working, your pricing is probably right, and your customers understand your value. Close rate is kind of like a mirror. It tells you the honest truth of how you're doing. And your cash reserves. They are your safety net, the emergency tank, the difference between sleeping at night and staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. wondering if payroll's going to clear tomorrow. According to JP Morgan Chase, the average small business should have 27 days on hand. Service businesses typically have less than a week. Now, I'm an advocate of 90 days cash on hand for expenses, not income. One slow season that's slower than you expected, one broken van, 1 month of callbacks, everything can turn upside down really, really quickly, right? Cash reserves are going to protect the payroll. Again, we had talked about it earlier. If you've got employees that you want to keep, and who doesn't want to keep their best employees, you really should have a way to protect the payroll. Cash reserves help cover for emergencies. They can help fund your growth. For me, they reduce my stress. They prevent debt, and they create more peace. When you have the cash built up, you stop making desperate decisions. You stop taking those nightmare clients. You can afford to say no. You stop discounting out of fear. You stop hiring the wrong people. You go from survival mode to strategy mode. And when you don't track cash, in the busy season, you're probably going to be like, hey, we're rich, woohoo! And in the slow season, you're like, holy smokes, how did this happen? We don't have enough money for payroll. And then you do the dance. Hey, you know what? Let's delay paying this supply house so we can do this. Or, ask the CPA for an extension. Hey, you know what? Why don't we just put this on a credit card for now? And we'll just pay it when we get busy. Or, do we even have enough money for payroll? Are those checks, those paper checks, going to become rubber? Or in the case of direct deposit, is it going to bounce right back and say, yeah, no, you ain't got that? That's anxiety. Now, when you cash reserves, what they tell you when they're off, if they're low, you could be underpriced. You could be undercharging. This is a big one, the overspending. A lot of companies do that checkbook accounting, especially when they're busy, right? They need a tool, they need a part, they go to the checkbook. And in most cases today, they go to the app. They look at the app and say, there's money in the account. Boom. Let's go buy that. And then come slow season, the money's not there and you're wondering where it went. Well, you spent it when you were busy instead of saving it. Your margin could be too small. Maybe you have too much overhead. You haven't planned for the slow seasons. And that's because you probably don't have a budget. And you're not paying yourself properly. And if your cash reserves are high, if you have that 3 to 6 months in there, you're probably profitable. You're definitely disciplined. You're ready for growth. You're ready for the slow times. And you have options. Instead of being stressed over making a decision, you have an option. You can sit there and look at the different options. Hey, we've got time to make this decision. This is the way to go. Or, you know what? Let's go this way instead because it'll get us to where we want to go faster. Or it's more aligned with where we want to go and how we want to get there, who we are. And now you're running your service business like a real business, like a real boy, right? Most trade companies, and I was part of it, we run the business more like a job. I just want to stay busy. I want to keep a couple people busy, and that's all it is. But that's where we get into the stress because we're not running it like a real business. And then we turn around and see these 100, 150, $200 million HVAC companies, plumbing companies, electrical companies taking over the area because they're not afraid to watch these numbers and to make them happen, because most of those big companies are not technicians. They're business people and they understand the numbers. All right, your cash is your oxygen. Sorry for getting on the soapbox. Without your cash, everything suffocates. So these 5 KPIs, the revenue, profit margin, customer acquisition cost, close rate, cash reserves, these are not optional. They're not just for the $100, $200 million companies. They're not for the Harvard MBAs. They're for everyday service business owners. These are the 5 I recommend you start with. And as you grow, we're going to add more, but it can all be automated. These numbers shouldn't intimidate you. They should empower you. Because once you start watching them, 3 things are going to happen. You're going to make better decisions. You're going to stop guessing. And you're going to be able to grow with confidence. The data doesn't lie. It doesn't panic. Doesn't sugarcoat anything. And it tells you exactly where the business is strong and where it's weak and what to fix next. And here's the best part. Once you get these numbers dialed in, everything gets easier. Your marketing becomes more predictable. Your sales become more consistent. Your hiring gets clearer. Your profit becomes normalized. Stress goes down. Cash goes up. Here's my challenge to you. Pick 1 or 2 of these 5 KPIs and start tracking them weekly. Not monthly. Not when you, quote, get around to it. Track them weekly. Because what gets measured gets improved. And what gets ignored eventually explodes. You know, if you want to help setting these up, if you want to build a real dashboard, dialing your pricing, fix your margins, and build cash reserves, book a strategy call with us. Let's get you out of the chaos and into control. Build a business that doesn't just survive, but let's build a business that supports you, not the other way around. You know, this is Business Growth Made Simple. These 5 KPIs are where they all begin. Again, I'm Steve, your host, and I'm looking forward to helping you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Book that strategy call. Thanks. Hope you have a great day. Look to you next week.